Welcome to the first day of the rest of your life. My name is Andy Zaremba, and welcome to another episode of Vancouver Real.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yeah, and with me behind the helm today is, of course, as always, or as usual, Mike.
Hi.
And
Hi.
yeah,
That's a new one.
It's an interesting.
That just came out of the ether.
You know, sometimes starting these things is a little awkward. You got to just kind of, have to start speaking and think of something to say on the fly, and you're like, well, let's see how this one turns out.
Here we go. And you come out with hi.
There you go.
That's what happens sometimes.
It works. But moving right along. Let's see, where can we start today? Well, we could talk about andysremba.com.
Oh, yes.
andysremba.com for all of your Andy Zaremba needs. So, basically,
I want 3.
Yeah, you can have 3 of those. Basically, what it's going to be is a website that's sort of like bringing all of our little entities under one space. Because I had this question posed to me last week, actually, by Roger Killen, host of TEDx Stanley Park.
Yes.
And he was saying, you're doing all these different things, but he's like, how do they relate? How do they all connect? And I'm like, well, actually, they all kind of connect through me. They're all like little vectors and ventures that I've created. So You can go to andysremba.com and check out all of our entities and all the things, all the little projects we have going on. And there's quite a few in there, including the one we're sitting in right now, Float House. And if you've never heard of floating before, you can go to the website, floathouse.ca. And you can learn whatever you want to learn about flotation therapy.
There's a lot of info on that website.
A lot of info about floating. Or you can go to YouTube, if you're on YouTube, and search the video for what is floating. I think we're at like 270,000 views on that video now.
Yeah.
So we've made a nice little impact, a dent in the YouTube world.
It's a very, we put a lot of effort into that video, and it's very clear and concise. And we actually get emails from, I'd say they've had probably about half a dozen or so over the course of the last couple of years of the different float centers wanting to put it on their website. And I'm like, yeah, as long as you embed it from YouTube, go for it, just because they appreciate how, I guess, concise it is.
Yeah, so it's 7 minutes.
Good resource there.
It's good for training. It's good for, like, if you have a float center and you listen to this and your staff need to learn what to say about floating, they can watch that video and you can pick it up pretty quick. So check out what is floating, or go to the website floathouse.ca and use the promo code Vancouver Real, and you can receive 20% discount on a single float. Also, we can talk about Mindful Mass. We're going to probably be doing event most likely on June 21st at City Hall. So keep an eye open for that. It's on International Yoga Day. So we're going to do some yoga and meditating at a big, grounds near City Hall, which should be pretty fun. So go to mindfulmass.org, or you can go to Mindful Mass Vancouver Meditation Flash Mob on Facebook, and we can connect with the group there. And lastly, we have the Vancouver Real community. And what the Vancouver Real community is just a bunch of people that listen to the podcast that like to come out and hang out in person from time to time. And it's headed by Candace and Sean, and they're actually putting together a course that's going to be called the Life in Motion program, which they're going to be launching probably in September. But it's going to be really cool. It's going to have 3 local teachers. One named Slava, who's been on the podcast before. He's a yogi to the stars, but he's like a movement specialist, kind of like Ido Portal. He does all these crazy motions and acro yoga. Then there's going to be Carolyn Ann Budgell, who is a local meditation teacher. And I can't remember the other woman's name right now, but she's a nutritionist, so she gets your diet in line. Yeah, what's her name? And I just met her the other day, so I'm like...
was she just on?
No, that was a different one. But anyway, so it's going to be 3 components to the course. It's going to be a movement component, a meditation component, and a nutrition component. So 3 big pillars. If you get those things going in your life, you should be on a good track.
Good foundation.
Yeah. So anything else you want to throw in there today?
No, I think that's it. I think VancouverReal.tv is a great place to connect with that community, sign up for the mailing list, or you can join on Facebook as well.
Totally. Well, today we got connected with our guest, and it was actually through an email. We just got an email out of the ether from your colleague on your own podcast. And what's your podcast name again?
Grief Dreams Podcast.
Grief Dreams Podcast. Yeah. And with us today is Jade Karling Black. And your website is jadekarling.com or jadekarlingcoaching.com if you'd like to get in touch with her. And you're also an author. You wrote your own book, which is quite the accomplishment, I have to say, because it's like the idea of writing a book, it's like it's in my psyche, but it just seems so daunting. It's like, where do you even start to put the pen to paper? But this is your book. It's called, let's see here. It is Open Mind and Open Heart by Jade Black.
Quiet Mind. Open Heart.
Quiet Mind and Open Heart. Sorry, excuse me.
Yeah.
You can all see that. But anyways, welcome to Vancouver Real.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So we were discussing a little bit beforehand today about what we want to talk about on the podcast, and this is such a common theme these days. It seems like so many people are searching for purpose and meaning in their lives. And, in this day and age, people do seem to be quite lost, and they can't really, deal with that problem of, what they're here to do or what they should be doing with their lives, and they feel sort of lost. And I'm sure you come across this topic with your coaching clients quite often. So if somebody comes to you and they say, I don't know what I'm doing, I need some help, how can you start with them? How would you walk them through that process?
Well, first of all, those are my favorite kind of clients because I like people that don't come with a laundry list of I want to be better at public speaking or I want to lose 10 pounds or I like the people that come and say something doesn't feel right, but I don't know what it is and I want to get somewhere, but I don't know what that is either. And so because, there's a lot more room for like flexibility and stuff with those clients. But I think in a general sense, it's really about figuring out what your passions are and what really helps you make sense of your life, something that motivates you to wake up and want to get out and do whatever it is that you want to do. I mean, people want to feel motivated about what they're doing, and I think if you don't have meaning in your day-to-day life, then you're gonna feel a lack of motivation. And so that's different for all different kinds of people because it's dependent on a variety of factors. I didn't really start feeling like my life had meaning until I started kind of connecting with a spiritual journey. So then I would kind of view my life as I was on a road to get back to a place of, this is a little bit hard to describe, but a place of feeling loved and feeling lovable and feeling like I had a place in the world and kind of like I could fit in with myself more or less. But yeah.
So what does that mean when you say a spiritual journey? Because people have a lot of probably preconceived notions in their mind about what that might look like or what that means. What does that mean to you?
Spiritual journey.
That's a tough one.
That's a big question.
Yeah.
Well, and it's so different for all different kinds of people. I think when I was growing up, I had this idea of what spirituality meant, and it was really closely connected with organized religion. As I got older and started asking a lot more questions, I came to a place where I started kind of figuring out that my idea of religion and spirituality was different from what I was experiencing in like my firsthand experience.
Right.
So just like, my grandparents were religious and they went to church and it was like, oh, you go. But I never really felt it like in my being. Like I wasn't really moved by it or felt inspired. So I think spirituality for me has just been making sense of all the events that have happened in my life, because when I'm in a place where I feel like everything is random and I'm just kind of going through the motions, then I start feeling super discouraged. If I feel like there's something bigger than me kind of moving the pieces around and leading me to connect with different people, show me different parts of myself, then I become more joyful because I'm like, oh, there's kind of more to the story. And I think some people need that. Like I like feeling like there's more to the story. I like feeling like life is a curriculum of sorts and we're here and we're all learning and, falling down and making mistakes and getting back up and getting more and more connected to our heart space, which is where I feel the most comfortable and the most authentic in myself. And it's also when I connect with other people in the most real way. So like that to me is where my purpose and my meaning
where it
comes from. Yeah.
So it's like when you sort of really started connecting with the more spiritual aspects of yourself, that helped you find the meaning and purpose that you were looking for.
Yes.
So is that where you start with people if a client comes in, or is that like
no?
I was gonna say
no. See,
it's probably different for every single client, right?
right. And like in the beginning, I mean, I had like a little bit of spiritual curiosity, but when I first started my journey, like the first notable kind of shift into like a new direction, I was in college at the time, and I was studying psychology. And that was like the first time in my life where I felt like, you know, because like when you're young, you feel like you know it all and you got it all figured out. And then, you know, you go to a college class or a university, psychology class, and then you realize like, oh, there's all these concepts, you know, sociological and psychological concepts that suddenly make the world so big.
Yeah, you get your mind blown.
You get your mind blown.
It's
so
true.
then you're like, oh
and that
my
would
God.
be the advantage to a degree in like sociology, psychology. I took
Yes.
sociology as well. So
Yes.
I gotta say, like, people say it is kind of useless. It's useless for trying to find a job unless you maybe go into education or you go get a master's degree and take it further. But
Yes.
it is quite expansive. Like it really shifts your view of the world to a way different picture, and that's what I really enjoyed about it. It's very full, you know, it's very sort of philosophy based, but it's also backed by data and research and some science there.
And then just like
So-
historically, what's actually happened, and like
It's
Yeah.
very intriguing.
and
Right.
following like how ideas have evolved over time and that sort of thing, and realizing right where some of these ideas in your head come from.
Yes.
And I find that that's sort of the value. So it's like you have just a broader perspective on everything. It seems like.
Right.
Not everything, obviously, but maybe a better understanding of like making sense of life. You know, I think that would be a good way to say it.
Absolutely. And I totally agree with that. I feel like it's a little bit of a trick because, yeah, I have a criminology degree and a sociology degree. I don't work
Same as me.
per se in
Yeah.
any of those fields,
Yeah.
but school made me punctual. It made me a better writer. It
Yes.
mastered my organizational skills. It made me commit to something that I had to see through to the end. So it built character.
Yeah.
None of those things can guarantee me a job, but they can guarantee me, you know, a better character. Like it built character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So school has all these, post-secondary education has all these hidden kind of nuances.
Well, you don't have to be there anymore, right?
No, you don't.
And they don't really care if you fail. So it's just
No,
like,
they don't.
Yeah.
But like for me, it was like, I was a high school dropout. I dropped out of high school in the 11th grade and I was like, I don't need this. I'm kind of at a stage where I was like too cool for school. Well, joke was on me because once I got older, I'm thinking, oh, I might actually need this for something. So I better like hustle. And then once I got back there, I was like, I'm really going to do this and I'm going to see this like pretty far.
Right.
So I put all my eggs in that basket and was like, okay, let's do this. So it gave me something to really focus on and take pride in myself. And when I was younger, I felt like I wasn't, you know, smart. So it was a way of proving myself, you know, wrong and saying I didn't feel smart
Yeah.
but I can do this. So that's a little bit of a dissonance there.
I think that's common for quite a few people actually, because when you're in school, generally you have to follow a certain curriculum and you're told what to study and you have to pass all these certain courses. But when you go to university or post-secondary of some kind and you get to study what you're interested in, typically people do a lot better, funny enough, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think so, like, just to kind of circle back to how school got me going was that when I was in a psychology class and I would like start learning a lot of these terms and these theories and these psychological concepts of how people think and human behavior and cognitive processing, then it was almost like everything started to click. And then I started asking myself, well, why am I like that? Or why do I respond to different events in that way?
Yeah.
And so that sent me on like a psychological tailspin. And, you know, it was amazing, right?
Yeah.
Because I really got in tune with myself because I could, like, what are my aversions? What are my attachments? What
Sure.
is attachment? So then, yeah, I just really started figuring out, like, where I'm stuck, where I'm fucked.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You can say that. That's okay.
Like where I'm really fucked up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and all the blocks I have, and then also just the cool socialization of all of it, like some of the unconscious drives and processes that I had, and kind of exploring where some of those might have come from.
You know what I thought was really interesting? Richard Alpert or Ram Dass?
I write about him
Or-
in that book.
I'm looking forward to reading this book, by the way.
Yeah.
He was saying that he was doctorate in psychology,
Yeah.
Harvard.
Yep.
And he ventured into the world of psychedelics with Tim Leary, and then later on went to go study under Neem Karoli Baba in India and had this giant spiritual awakening. And he said the reason he went down that path is because he said, psychology wasn't enough. It wasn't, there was gaps in it. And like they have a lot figured out, but they don't have everything figured out. So
Right.
it turned him to these sort of other modalities, if you want, to explore those things. And it's just so common, I think, when people start diving into that world, it starts like branching off, or it becomes like a hydra into all these different areas, and you chase one for a while and you learn about it, then you go down this other, and it leads you to another place, and it's just so common. And I feel like so many people who have been on this podcast, and probably us included, we're always sort of winding down that path to search for meaning and significance and understanding and truth and all of that stuff. It's just such a common theme, I think.
Absolutely.
Not
And
with
it's
everybody, but
a lot of people.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And actually, it's so funny that you bring that up without having read the book, but I came to a place where I was feeling like, okay, and it's so funny, Ram Dass says, like, you can go to a psychologist and they can help you organize your jail cell, but you're not getting out of that jail cell. So it can be
Right.
neat and tidy and you can have an understanding of it, but it can only carry you so far, which leads me to the next, part, is that I started feeling like, okay, this is good. I've learned a lot, but there has to be something else on top of this. So I remember going through my iTunes one night and coming across this audiobook called Finding and Exploring Your Spiritual Journey. And it was a Ram Dass audiobook. And no, I wasn't in grad school. I was in like my last year of undergraduate at the time. And I remember laying in my bed with my headphones on, listening to and it was like bombs going off in my room. Like everything he was describing and like the wit and the humor. And
he's such a good speaker.
Oh,
and lecturer,
it was
by
just,
the way.
it was
Yeah.
nuts. It was
Yeah.
like I was falling in love to what I was listening. And I was
Yeah.
like, I can't get enough of this. So he was describing all the experiences that I had, but I couldn't put a name to. So it was like I had found like a key. So I knew in that moment, this is going to take me somewhere else. And it has, and I haven't got off that train since. And so I write about that a lot in the book, like my connection with Ram Dass and how closely I relate to that with the academic stuff and all that has just been amazing for me. And then of course he's led me to India and back again 1,000 times. And so I've just become super enthused with the Hindu religion and all kinds of Indian
Eastern
mythology and, Indian like texts and stuff like that. And so that's been a big part of my exploring as well. So, yeah.
I like that comment you made about you can organize your jail cell, but you can't get out of it.
Right.
That really does seem like a metaphor for life in general. It's just like, not necessarily being in jail, but we are all confined. It's like people have this sort of illusion of freedom, like, well, we're free, we can do whatever we want, well, within reason, obviously.
Right.
But like, we do have the confines and limitations of just being, and we wouldn't
Right.
even have we have to have that in order to have experience. You know what I mean? It's like we have.
Right.
So it's like people want to say, "Oh, I'm so free." Well, you're not really free. You're inside this biological suit with all sorts of limitations that you have to adhere to, and you have to be in it. And it's such an interesting thing because it's like, how do you deal with that problem, right? How do you deal with the existential nature and the finite nature of our reality? How do we cope with that? Because it's like, we're all brought into this life, and it's like we didn't really opt in. It's just like we pop out, we're like, here we are, and it's like, you have to deal with this, and you have to go through all the pain and the suffering and everything
Right.
else that's involved with life. And it's like, oh, and by the way, you're all in. you're all in regardless if you like it or not. There's no getting out of it. You have to go through it. You know what I mean? So you can avoid and you can, distract yourself with all these different things. But at the end of the day, it's like we're all going on that journey. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, how do we deal and cope with that? Because let's be honest, there's a lot of things in life that'll get you.
Absolutely. And it's a hard go, and like I think of Ram Dass saying taking a body is a hard go, but you can awaken through the human stuff too. Like, you know what I mean? You have to incorporate the human stuff, which is your personality and all your social roles. And you have to find a way to not try and go around that, but just like go right through that and understand, that's part of what this journey is about. That's part of what this curriculum is about. To be a father, a teacher, bus driver, or Libra, or whatever it is, there's all that personality stuff too. And that's part of it. And yes, in the most spiritual sense, yes, you're a free being and all that, but you also have a body, and yeah, exactly what you said, it has limitations. And
right. And the interesting quote I heard from that one was, if what do gods lack? If there was a god that was an infinite being, what do they lack? And the answer is limitation. Right? So it's like you need that limitation in order to have the experience. It's like the idea of playing a game. It's like there's limited rules within that game, but then within that game, all sorts of possibility can manifest. So if it's completely unlimited, then you wouldn't even have the game. So we need that limitation in order to have the experience, which is like kind of a weird way of thinking about it.
Well, it also, when you're talking like that, for me, it brings up the idea of just polarities and like, the polarity nature, of reality, the hot, cold, the
dualistic nature.
That's the best.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so they have to have the infinite and the finite to coexist to have a conscious existence, I suppose. So that's something that's just kind of blasted through my head.
Yeah.
But I'm curious as to like what kind of turned you into a life coach? Like obviously you had your educational background, but why did you decide to kind of go down that path and stick with it?
Well, like initially I was interested in doing working in addiction just because of my own experience with addiction, and I did my master's degree on exploring women's pathways to recovery from drug addiction. So what I did was looking at all the barriers that women face when trying to shift out of addiction into recovery. So I used my own journey as a qualitative kind of side note to my master's thesis, and I thought I'm going to work in an addiction center. That's what I'm going to do. And yeah, so that was kind of my intention. And when I initially came out here, I actually worked at a rehab center or a recovery center for a while. And that was great. That was, I learned a lot there and stuff. But I really found just in my personal life that a lot of people struggle with addiction, but addiction as I've discovered, is greater than substance abuse. Mm-hmm. Like every single person I've ever encountered has an addiction to negative thinking and negative thought processes. And it works, I don't want to say it works the same as substance abuse, but there's a lot of similarities between substance abuse and the the cycle of negative thinking.
Totally.
So I would connect people over that, and I'm like, everyone's really addicted to like negativity all the time, right? It's very cynical and stuff.
Do you think there could be a reason for that, like a pragmatic reason for people to be always looking out for threats?
Well, I think there's a lot of perpetuated fear in our culture in general. I think so. I think the societal climate is not conducive to feeling free and liberated. I think it's conducive to I'm not good enough. I'm scared.
Right.
Buy, run, hide. It's what I mean. Everywhere you look is that people aren't. It's not really that by nature. Do you know what I mean? So,
right. Yeah. And so you're saying the climate of our culture is more geared that way. Yet it could be argued that, and it has been, I think, that this is one of the safest times to ever live. And like you should feel if there's ever a time to feel secure in life, I guess in terms of
it is in terms of poverty.
But you're right.
Levels,
why is the climate
violence,
that way?
Things like that.
But I think a lot of that's in your mind. Yeah. So regardless of if it's physically safe out there, That in your head, is it physically safe?
Well,
Right.
is it ever really physically safe? That's a good question. Because something is going to get us one way or the other, and we know that. You know, it's like,
Right.
so that's why it kind of gets back to that existential sort of question too, right? It's like, how do we deal with that?
So even if it's not safe, like
Yeah.
even theoretically, if it's not safe, it's a very dangerous place. Which immediately comes to mind that Albert Einstein quote saying, "Is the world a friendly?"
I've been thinking about that one too, right?
Is the world a friendly place, or is the world
Yeah.
a scary, dangerous place? And
Yeah.
the way you answer that question is going to determine a lot of different facets of your life.
With the lens you're viewing it through, for sure.
Right. So even theoretically, if the world is a very, very dangerous place and we're all at risk, then we have a choice to, like, if that's the way it is, then that's kind of like, okay, we're at risk then. So either
Yeah.
we
Get comfortable with the risk.
either live at risk, or you know what I mean? We live in that constant fear, or we just say, okay, let's just ride it out best we can and live the best we can. And if it's dangerous, then it's
Yeah.
dangerous.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy for me to say that too, living
you know,
here.
Sure.
And
If I was-
I see
Yeah.
that, like, you know, you can kind of, once you get to know someone a little bit too, you can kind of probably see, like, roughly which lens do they view their life through. Whether, is it a friendly place or is it a scary,
Oh,
dangerous
yeah.
place? Like,
Oh, yeah.
within a, you know, an evening with somebody, usually you could probably, if you're paying close attention and like just really listening,
Mm-hmm.
you can kind of tell, like, yeah, which lens are they more of, is there a lot of anxiety there? Is there a lot of like threat concerns or whatever? You can kind of usually pick up on that. It's kind of a cool exercise if you ever want to go try and
Do
do
a
that.
little social experiment.
Yeah,
with
just
the
just
people.
observe. It's just observing.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, it's like we've evolved to look for what's wrong. It's like we've evolved to identify sort of what's wrong with the situation in order to survive. And it's like, I see it all the time. People, when you suggest something new to somebody, or anybody suggests something new to something, usually the first response is, it won't work because of this or X. You know, it's like, nope, won't work because of this. They'll point, you know, the biggest thing we hear about all the time at Float House,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, we're gonna put you in a float tank, and you're gonna lie in there and spend some time with your thoughts. But immediately, the first thing, like almost a program response, without even thinking about it, half the time comes out. But what if I'm claustrophobic? Like that exact phrase. But what if I'm claustrophobic? Comes out, right? And it's like, yes, you might be claustrophobic, but it's like, you chose to focus on the one thing that might be bad about it in your
Right.
mind, as opposed to all the possibilities that could open up if you got quiet and spent time with yourself.
Right.
I just think it's such a natural human inclination that we all do. So it's like, how do we, you know, bust out of that when it seems to be like so universal?
Right. And I think when thinking of bad things, I mean, it took me a long time to get to this point, but you know, when we were talking at the beginning about purpose and about making sense of your life.
Yeah.
And so when I look back on my life and some of the things that weren't ideal, things that happened to me, things that I engaged in, like addiction and different just horrible situations that I would never wish on anybody, and experiences, those experiences can change me to further be afraid and closed off and cut off from the world, or I've created this model in my mind that I thoroughly believe in, that though something orchestrated those events in my life. And so I can either look at them as, I can use them as building blocks for where I am to go after that, or I can,
Use
you
it
know,
as an
be
excuse.
as an excuse, and, you know, stay in that victim kind of place, which is a
Just
horrible,
try to stay safe.
it's a horrible place to be in a victim mentality, right? Because
Yeah.
you're constantly, and that goes in line with, you know, this isn't going to work because, and I can't catch a break, and my life sucks. And I mean, we all have, you know, struggles, and we all have things that life is a roller coaster ride.
You know, one of the big things too I notice with people is when they are sort of in that victim mentality. You know, one interesting thing is, you know, you can't be a victim and a master at the same time. You can't be like super empowered and feeling good and be in a victim state. It's pretty much, they don't exist together.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like you have to be in one or the other. But let's say you're working with somebody, you can clearly see that they have some sort of story that they're hanging on to, which is keeping them in that mode. You know, how do you reflect that back to them in order to get them to try to work through it or move past it?
Yeah, it's a lot about a perspective, right? And how we can pull meaning out of things, because it's like being a victim is everything's random and things just kind of happen to you and you can't make sense of it. But like, there's only kind of two options when shitty things happen. And it's like, we either turn this into something that you can work and you want to push forward into something like, we have to find some meaning in it or some understanding.
Yeah.
And like, victim and blame, those things go hand in hand as well. So if you're a victim, then there's always somebody to blame. So immediately rooted in that is criticism and judgment for somebody else's behavior. And when you understand who you are as a person and some of the things that you might have done that are not ideal things, and this comes up with my clients a lot, because they say, he did this, or he's done this, or he's messed up, and my life sucks because of him or her, like vice versa. Yep. And it's like, so you've never done anything that was unethical or rude or inconsiderate or not completely clean, in morally speaking. And then as soon as you say that, then it's like, it's hard to be
it's pretty
mad.
Irrefutable.
It's hard to be mad to the same degree, because when you're standing in a place of compassion, you understand people. Like, I don't think people just wake up and say, I just want to go out there and just be a mean person today. Like, I honestly don't. Yeah. I think people are in a lot of pain, and that comes out in a lot of weird ways. So when you start looking at that, then you say, oh, that person's suffering, and now I can reflect on all the areas in my life where I've been suffering, and I might have not, I may have engaged in some things that weren't the best. Like when
changing the frame around of the
just
of
reframing
the story.
Everything,
right.
Yes, because then it leads them over to a place of compassion and understanding, and then it's like, oh, the anger can't keep up, because as soon as you put yourself in somebody else's shoes, it's humbling. It's so humbling.
Yeah,
that's right.
I think that's a great exercise.
And that's
to
probably
try to do.
a huge reason why, like, a coach or somebody in your life that can do that for you. And like, if you don't have somebody like a legit solid friend that can be that mirror, then that's where like a coach or someone can come into place. It's like, you need to have that, like, okay, you're saying all of this, but what about this? They don't even see, or they're blind to at that time. And then when they get that, then they're like, oh.
Yeah, and I have those conversations with my client. They say, oh, I'm doing bad today at the beginning of our session. And I said, you won't by the time we're bad. Or I'm angry, and the world sucks or whatever. Let's just take our 60 minutes and we'll sit down. And it's never that at the end. Right. It's all like, everyone's doing their best. Thank you. And you know what I mean? And I'm like, they really are. They really are doing their best. And I think too, I use a lot of examples of my own life. Because I saw a psychologist for years, and what I didn't like about it was she helped me and she gave me some great tools, but she would never express any of the struggles that she had. So I felt like the little helpless child, and she was the smart doctor. And so there was a disconnect between us, because it almost felt like she wasn't human. And I would ask her a lot of times, have you ever done this?
Right.
And she's like, I can't talk, ethics and whatever. And I get that.
And that's the nice thing about the coaching services is you're
I don't
not
care
really,
about that.
Exactly.
No.
You can basically have a real conversation.
My clients have read my book. They're like, dude, you've been a sex addict. Yes. You've been a drug addict. Yes. There's nothing my clients have done that I haven't already done. And so when they say, oh, I'm acting crazy, I always say, I bet you I act more crazy than that in my life. And so that's helpful to them, because we're like right here.
Relatable.
We're right here. We're working through it together.
Right.
And it's not me and you. It's like, it's a relationship that we walk, and they help me and I help them. And that's all it is.
Cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. In a situation like that, I've heard that it's really, really valuable just to have a very honest conversation. Mm-hmm. So when somebody says something to you, you give them like your honest like feedback, reaction, thoughts, even if it's not maybe even the right perfect answer, because it's giving that person just at least one person's honest feedback about what they think about you, because that's that's sort of how we calibrate our thinking and organize our thoughts. We do it based on testing out ideas and throwing it out there and getting feedback from peer groups. And that's why it's kind of so important. Like I heard the phrase, it takes a village to organize a mind. And it's like, if you don't have that that feedback from your peer group. It's like, well, you don't know what's good and what's not, and what's crazy and what's not. Or crazy is a bad word, obviously, but you know. So I feel like that might be a good place to start. Is just having, like, again, going back to having those genuine, honest conversations, and maybe you've seen things that people don't really want to hear.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you're gonna have to say that, but you better hope that the person that you're engaging with, you trust them to, you know, because like you're never gonna be completely free of you know, biases and stuff like that. Like I have my own. I try to, you know, come at people with a clear head, you know, to the best of my ability. But I've had my own life experiences, so that some of that's gonna go into, you know, it's almost like everybody involved has to use their discretion. But I really pride myself on knowing for myself and expressing this to my clients that, like, our heart is, like, seriously the best compass that we have. And if something doesn't feel right and you don't feel proud of it, then it's probably not a good idea. And so when I don't know the answer, or I can't say, you know, because I never tell, you know, the clients ask me sometimes, should I move to Spain or should I divorce him? I don't know. But I can only talk out the pros and cons with you and help you so that you feel empowered in whatever decision you're making, that you feel clean about the decision that you're making.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think you know what I mean?
So I want that too, is like listening to what your body's saying. Like, again,
it's very important.
If you feel like, if you say something that you know is sort of off or mean or negative or something or whatever, I tend to feel like weakness.
Absolutely.
I just feel like I withdrawn, like, just, I don't feel like,
not good.
Like I want to be out in the world. I don't feel extroverted. But when you say something that you really are genuine about and really mean, but it's like honest and coming from a good place, it's like you feel strong and you feel like you could just go and take on whatever you need to take on. It's
right.
like, you know, it's like not giving up our power, like not doing things that make us feel weak, you know.
Right.
I think that's kind of what you're talking about a little bit there. It's like, you know, again, when somebody you know, acts a certain way, you can you know, or when I say, or when I act a certain way and I say something, I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have said that, or shouldn't have done that,
right?
You know, and I find when I really pay attention to how I feel, it's like you can really you notice it viscerally, like when you know, when you're sort of in alignment that way.
Mm-hmm, very much so, and I think that just like, yes, you have to, you know, be honest and truthful to the best of your abilities, and just you have to really pay attention, because you always want things to be coming from a place of love and compassion and respect. Yeah. So even if I'm not fully, you know, in that space, like, you can always tell when if somebody's feeling vengeful or critical, like all those emotions that are negative, like you can pick up on those really easily, because it's just like, love has a certain feeling, compassion has a certain, and those things are going to carry you further in your personal life, in your relationships with others, all that. So I think the times I have to be the most honest with my clients is when they feel justified in being angry or being judgmental, and I say, you know, keep your judgments for now if you need them. It's fine if you're mad or you're pissed and you want to go through all that. You honor all that, and that's fine. But you also need to know that you're being very critical or you're being very judgmental, and that comes from a place of feelings of inadequacy or whatever that is, because nobody's just critical and mean and judgmental or vengeful because they're in an aligned space. Yeah, totally. That doesn't equal that.
Right.
So you can always pick up on how they're responding to other people is really just an indicator of how they're feeling about themselves. So that's easy to see. It's like an instant. So they always don't like that, because a lot of people, especially who are feeling emotionally unstable, want to be in their judgments for a while, want to be pissed at other people or want to blame, right? Because sometimes for people that want to avoid their problems, it feels really good to say it's his fault, you know?
What do you think about the idea that you can't help somebody who doesn't want to be helped?
Yeah, 100%. I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, even like when I was in like really heavy in my addiction and stuff, I had a lot of people come to me and say like, you got to change your life around. And like, it's not. There has to be, all the conditions and the factors have to be right. I don't know what all those conditions are. I know what they were for me.
What was it for you?
It's just that lifestyle there's so much emptiness and guilt and shame and
Pain.
disgust, and it's like this can only go one place, and I feel like shit, I look like shit, my relationships are shit, like everything's shit. So either I keep doing this, or there has to be something else. You just get really, really tired of it, and then you start wondering, like, is this all I'm here for? Because how boring is that if that's just the end of the story for me?
The idea of hitting rock bottom.
Oh, I've been there.
Right? It's like when someone hits that rock bottom, sometimes that's what they need. That's the required motivation to move them to a better place. It's like we have two basic motivators. It's like, moving away from the things we don't want and moving towards the things that we do want.
Right.
So it's like when the pain becomes great enough, pain is a huge motivator. And it's like sometimes that's what it takes. It takes that huge crash to hit rock bottom, to feel the pain. And then you'll be motivated to take action because you're like, I don't want that anymore.
Well, that shame is so, when you can't even look at yourself in the mirror, you don't know who you are, what you're doing, and you're so far from love. Like you can just feel you're like dead inside. Like that's the only way I can really describe it, is that feeling of, it's not even having fun. Like at that point, it's not even having fun or partying or what it was when it first began. It's just a mess of shame and dead spirit and pain and all those things, and it's just like it becomes palpable. You can't continue. It's like there has to be something else. And so for me, it was a pretty, like, I'm done with this. And it was like I had like one relapse, and it was like I'll never touch it again.
Right.
So I never went like the rehab thing, and it wasn't this long drawn out thing, but I think I had very intense years of using. So it was so intense that by the end of it, it felt like I had done enough for a lifetime.
Going back to Ram Dass,
yeah,
there was this story told, a quote, I'm going to mess it up completely, but he basically said, I want you, before you meditate, he's like, I want you to go and experience like this complete gluttony. I want you to eat as much as you want, do as much drugs, drink, whatever, like experience all of that fully. And once you've got all that out of your system, then come and meditate. Because it's just like, there's that idea that you can't sit and meditate when you have all these urges. And he's like, once you kind of experience all this like crazy sensorial, inputs, or whatever you want to call it,
right.
That could be something that now you're ready to actually be quiet, right? So like, you're going to say something?
Well, it's like kind of like how you said you got to a point where, sorry, let's put this up. Like you were dead inside, you're so disconnected from love, and not even that you understood that at that point, but like you just like what you were doing was like, is this it? And it kind of just took you to that point. So it's just very relatable.
Yeah,
what you said there to your
Yeah.
story.
Like we're really big on, you mentioned before, so the modalities you use to help transform yourself.
Yeah.
So what are some of those tools that you've used that have been really useful for you?
So a lot of the Ram Dass stuff, but a lot of like chanting. I've been really into. I connect with all different religions and stuff, but so Christianity, just developing a relationship with a higher power, and I've put a lot of faces on that higher power.
Now, when we say Christianity, the funny thing is about that, a lot of people have sort of very negative connotations around
Very
it
much
these
so.
days, right?
Very much so.
And there's a strong argument for that. You can definitely say that, like, they might have earned that.
Right.
But
I'm cool with all that too.
I'm not attacking or blaming. I'm just saying though, is there, even despite some of the, and you can say against any religion, like even the Buddhists have like done atrocities over the years, right?
Yeah.
But even within that, is there higher teachings and wisdom that you've drawn from that have helped you?
Very much so. So, and when I say the word Christian, I just say it out of a lack. I don't like the label of, I don't call myself a Christian. I read about that in the book. The expectations is like, I can't be that, that other people would want me to do. And I can't live up to some of those ideals. Mm-hmm. And those aren't aligned with who I want to be or like what I'm after. But I just mean more connection with who I have understood Jesus to be, and a lot of the things that are in the Bible, scriptures that I resonate with.
Yeah.
So
different
I'll just say
religions you've explored.
Right.
What other things? Chanting.
Chanting.
How's chanting worked for you?
it just helps me go into a meditative state. And I think I got led there through the Ram Dass and the Maharaji Neem Karoli Baba, and that led to the Krishna Das, who and you obviously know who Krishna Das is.
I've listened to his music. I don't know much more about him.
So he does a lot of chanting and stuff, and so it's Hanuman-based kind of Indian chanting.
Yeah.
So I use it as like a meditative practice.
Right. Any sort of like chanting or like even sound like drums can get you into that altered state of consciousness or a meditative state.
Right. And I know you guys had, just as a side note, Matthew Cosell was on your podcast. We interviewed him as well on our podcast. He's such a cool guy.
Did he do any singing on your podcast? He did some throat singing.
No, we added a song at the end. But I think we're going to do a workshop with him in September.
He's great. Cool. Yeah.
So we're going to do our little workshop thing, and then he'll sing at the end or whatever. So we've been kind of working on that. But so cool. But that, that's another way to use sound to get to where you're trying to go. So it's been that, but it's been a lot of what they call like Bhakti Yoga, which is like really devotional type stuff, which is really heart space centered. And I think that's just... Can
you go into that? What is that? And what's an example of that?
My connection to it would be like in the most simplest form would be praying and expressing my gratitude. And that might be like sometimes I sing like in my quiet space, it's gospel music or whatever music I'm connected with, as just like a heart space kind of gratitude offering. So just really, it's not a formal practice, but I think just constantly trying as much as I can to be grateful for my journey and where I've been led and what I'm able to see at this point in my life, in myself, and when I look at the world, a lot more beauty and purpose and passion and understanding and all those things. I'm so grateful.
Would you say that's kind of like the essence of Bhakti Yoga? It's like just a
devotional gratitude.
Yeah?
Yes,
cool.
For the world and also not judging it, but like just as it is.
Right.
Like not wanting to look at it and say, I wish it wasn't like this.
Right.
But like the things that I see in my own life and in other people's life that I encounter, like what we experience and how it brings us from there to here. Like it's amazing how strong people are, how resilient people are, humanity's stories, how people go from such pain to joy and just that whole thing. It's like, in my opinion, something is writing that story. It's too perfect.
So
it's far too perfect.
So it's like you're just seeing the beauty that is naturally in the world and choosing to see that and kind of like appreciating that and connecting it, even when there's pain and suffering. You're finding like, okay, there's meaning to that. There's beauty in that meaning, and
it's pain is powerful. Suffering is powerful.
Sure.
And that's what gets me to that high place. Like I've done I've tried to go through every door that there is basically at this point in my journey, like in terms of external sources. I've done a lot of drugs, all different kinds of drugs. They got high, but I can't stay. I can go through there and I've had wild experiences and things, and connecting with different things and while high and stuff and all that's great. It's an avenue and some people use it, but I could never stay in that space through doing that, through sex or drugs or food, eating disorder. They're all like attempts at controlling something that can't be controlled.
Do you meditate at all?
I do, yeah, I do. I do like a lot more chanting now. I do meditate, not as much as I used to, but I write a lot. Writing is my form of meditation. And then like I find myself meditating when I like to run a lot, so running is a type of meditation for me too. So
totally.
When you think of formally sitting down, I mean, yes, I've certainly engaged in all that too, but I just keep kind of shifting out of things and back in, and my attention kind of, things kind of cycle away and come back.
Totally. I mean, there's so many different tools out there. And we've been floating. I've been floating for, 7 years now, 8 years, something like that. 8 years.
How often do you guys do it?
I like to go at least once a week.
Okay.
In my ideal world, I'd be going 2 or 3 times a week.
Yeah.
But once a week is nice maintenance for me.
Okay,
But
yeah.
also interjecting little pieces of meditation throughout my week, I find to be really useful. And when you really go in and you go into the tank and you float for 90 minutes and you really try to do the meditative thing, really just try to slow it all down, relax as much as possible, become the observer and not so reactionary. That's a big part of it. And also training concentration and focus, like when your mind starts wandering, bring it back to the breath, bring it back to the body. Whatever.
Right.
It's become such a journey. It's like I don't. When people say they get bored in a float tank, sometimes I'm like, wow. You're not paying attention. You're just not paying attention.
No.
It's just like
'cause
there's so
lots
much
there.
going on.
Yes.
Right. It's like even just doing those little snippets of meditation throughout the week really help sort of bring it back, even if it's a short amount of time. One thing I've been looking into lately is the. Have you heard of Muse? It's like the. It's an EKG machine, and it goes
Okay.
around your head, and it monitors like your brainwave activities, and it gives you like real time data like on your phone. I'm thinking about getting one. You can get one for like $300 or something.
No way. I've never heard of it.
It totally monitors and gives you biofeedback.
Really?
Yeah, based on your meditative state and so much alpha theta brainwaves that you have and things like that at any given time. And it's just I don't know, like when you actually, because I think there is something to running and to, like, I do yoga and it's a similar thing that happens. It's very flowy,
I've done yoga, yeah.
right?
Yoga
Same
too is
thing.
great.
But there's something about, not doing something that really makes you focus in on
Right.
what's going on internally. Because when you're running, there's a lot of potential distraction. And when you're doing yoga, it's like, oh, I'm in a different pose. And like, there's so many things you can play around with. But it's like when you get really focused down and you just see your mind just like chattering away and going to all these different spaces. It's like,
Yes.
that's the thing to try to really hone in on.
Very much so. And I know people and lately I've really been trying to be more mindful of just random things I'm doing. So if I'm like washing dishes or pots in my kitchen or whatever,
That's a good practice
then
too.
like it's like I'm meditating when I'm doing that. Like
Yeah.
I'm so focused on just what I'm doing and appreciating the dish. It sounds really strange, but
No.
it's a way that I can.
Have you done a Vipassana before?
No, what's that?
Vipassana meditation. Actually, Ram Dass, I think, talks about it quite a bit. Basically, it's a 10-day silent meditation retreat that there's things all over the world.
I've done something like that.
Yeah,
Yes.
and that's part of the practice of that retreat is like outside of the formal 12 hours a day that you're meditating, which is broken up. You're bringing this mindfulness act to everything that you're doing, like your steps, the fabric on you, when you're eating food, touching the food, swallowing, like just bringing mindfulness to everything. And it's pretty crazy when you actually commit to that and work and exercise that muscle of attention as it develops, and like you kind of get immersed in this whole other like reality changes dramatically when you do that. Because
Really
you become.
cool.
There's so much that we block out, but when you kind of are in that retreat space, it gives you time to like, okay, I can do this exercise right now. I don't have to answer the emails or, go and take care of my son or whatever it is. You know what I mean? You can kind of like really dial it in, and it's such a crazy experience. But you're right, you can do it just washing
I
the
think
dishes.
you can be mindful in all different activities, and it's just like, are you giving it something your full attention? Because a lot of times, like, we're washing dishes and we're thinking, oh, I got to email so and so after, and then it take off the trash. Like, you're always just on to the next thing.
you're
And
not
tomorrow
here.
morning, exactly. So I think now, when I used to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to meditate for my half an hour. Now I'm thinking, how can I just meditate as I'm going? And I think of Ram Dass when he says, when he's doing his lectures, he's Ram, which is calling the name of God, no matter what. So he's talking to somebody, and his mind is like, not that he's not there and engaged, but do you know what I mean? He's not attached to everything that's happening in the engagement or the lectures he's giving. He's doing a meditation. He's chanting the name of God.
And I think all that, like the mindfulness meditation aspect, is super useful for sure. Like it's and it's like it's such a thing that's, I'd say, we're completely out of balance of in terms of being really present. Our society is very entertainment focused, very externally motivated, goal oriented, all of those different things. However, it's like you can get down the trap of like, well, why should I do anything? I could sit under a tree and just meditate all day and be present, and that's it, right? So it's like we also have to function and live in the world, and that's the idea of being awake, being awake, we have the gift of foresight, the gift of being able to try to create the world in the way that we want to around us by how we're doing things in the present. So it's like, being able to reminisce about the past is good because, well, how do we learn? We learn from past experiences, right? And we say we don't want to go there anymore. Or, how do we plan for the future? It's by, creating a little avatar of ourselves and putting them in potential future situations and being like, all right, what do I think is going to happen there? You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's like finding that balance between both, I think, is really important. But I think for the most part, we're so like distraction-oriented, goal-oriented that we don't do the mindfulness thing, which it probably needs to be emphasized more, but it's like you can go too far on that spectrum as well.
Absolutely. And it's so funny that you said that, because I came to a point in my journey where it's like, that's it, I'm quitting life, I'm dropping out of university. I think a lot of people have that experience when you figure out you've been had. Like, I came to a point like, I've been had, everything I thought that was real is a lie. And do you know what I mean? Just everything I thought about love, about family, about the social world, it's not real. And so you're just feeling that immediate thing, like that desire to quit and retreat. But then it's like, after you like calm down and you reflect, and it's like, no, like there's a reason why I live in like Western Canada or Ontario or out west. And
in the West, yeah.
I'm here in the Western world, and now I understand that my journey is to embrace, all the things that come with just I'm not supposed to go up in the mountains, and I don't feel drawn to do that. I mean, I may in like a moment of
retreat.
You know what I mean? Feeling like, oh gosh, I mean, it's
totally
fine
valuable
to go do that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But do I feel like that's where I'm meant to go for the next 30 years?
Yeah, well,
not
there's
really.
an interesting story about like, the monk that would be in seclusion meditating for 30 years, and then he's this enlightened being, and then he goes down into the marketplace and he gets jostled. And he starts getting agitated, starts getting annoyed, and and then he gets all upset because he's not enlightened anymore. And they have to actually say in like the ninth bull of Zen Buddhism that at that stage you actually have to go back into the world, and you actually have to be in the marketplace. And that's the true test. It's like, yes, you can go in the mountains and be in a beautiful place and be enlightened, but it's like,
what about New York
be
City?
enlightened when, you haven't gotten sleep and your son is crying, or something's blowing up at work, or you're having a relationship problem. That's the test of enlightenment right there.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you can't be enlightened in New York City, the job isn't done. So I don't know, like, different situations pull different things out of you. I always think of Ram Dass saying, like, if you think you're enlightened, go spend a week with your family.
Oh yeah, that'll get you. That'll bring you right back down.
I love my family, but you know what I mean? If anyone can kind of, so yeah, it's a process. It's a beautiful process. And, a day at a time, we just kind of work through it.
Totally.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and it kind of come back to this idea that we touched on earlier too, was I think it's so important to just come back to, and this is, I think, been so lost in the sort of war of words on the internet, and blaming and everyone getting upset with everybody, and the polarity between right and left, and masculine and feminine. There's so many dualities, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, just remember, it's like everybody is shaped by their own experience. There's a lot of that stuff that's being run completely unconsciously, and we're all full of our own biases. So I'm really working on, like, you have to have a certain amount of accountability, but also having compassion for why people are the way they are and do the things that they do. Because it's like, man, it's like everyone. Again, we're not necessarily here voluntarily.
Like, I think you can be personally responsible for yourself, right? Being responsible, but then also be living from, as much as you can, a heart-centered, compassionate place. And I think that kind of self acceptance and work and accepting your life for what we kind of, like you said, popped into, and then also bringing this kind of greater compassion into it can probably do a lot of good if we can kind of adopt that on a massive scale.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think our job is to like be okay with what we're doing. And so it's not like, so many people are saying like, I'm this, but you have to be the, all the political debate and the polarities, I'm this and you're that, and trolling online and stuff. It's crazy. It's like, the only thing we need to be okay with is what we're doing, and self-acceptance, and you have to make sure your behavior is something you're proud of. And then after that, but that's hard for people because they're saying, I need you to live like this.
Right.
Well,
right?
there is the whole idea too of sort of the enemy at the gate, or the dragon that's outside, that's a threat to you. So people are again looking for that threat. They're looking for the thing. So it's like, if people are acting in a certain way that you can see that could threaten you, then it's like that question, like, should you act first? Should you go against them? And should you prevent that harm from coming your way, or from your family's way, or your country's way, or whatever? Because
Right.
that's totally there. Like the external threats. I mean, we're always on the lookout for those things, right?
See, I hear that and my mind goes right to, what is it in me that can be threatened?
What does that mean exactly?
Like, whatever's hurtable or threatenable, for lack of a better word. In like, when I hear that, I think what part of me feels like it can be threatened. Like when you're looking at outside and you're saying, somebody's the dragon at the gate or whatever, right? Like, what part of me can be hurt is where it kind of points to what work I might have to do, whether that's physical harm or,
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just where my mind goes, right?
Right. And I think it's great. I think yeah, for sure. Like, turning it back on yourself and being like, what can I do differently, for sure.
Yeah.
But it's at the same time, it's like, like you can use the example of, say, the environmental destruction.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
just like, we all sort of know that this is a big problem, and there's some
Mm-hmm.
people that are like very environmentally minded, and they're trying their best to sort of conserve the world and the planet, and there's other people that have no regard for it whatsoever.
Absolutely.
So it's like, well, those people that have no regard, in a sense, are a threat to your
The rest,
existence and
yeah.
the future of humanity's existence.
Your
So it's like,
children and all that.
so it's like, where do you draw the line? It's
Right.
like, where do you say, I'm gonna, and then eventually, somebody will make a law and say, you can't do this, you can't do that, and but it's like, I think you have to still be on the lookout for those things too.
I absolutely agree, and I think that those people that are passionate about the environment use their time and their efforts to do what they can to put their drop,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, like in the bucket, and that they find purpose and meaning from that, and I think that's amazing. Are we going to be able to change everybody's mind to force them to care about something that might not be important to them? Like, that's
Yeah.
unfortunate, right? Even when people just litter or throw stuff or like on the ground or whatever, right?
I'm
Or-
not saying necessarily just that example. I'm just
Right.
saying that's like an example of
That's
how other
one.
people's actions are affecting your life. And,
Right.
it's like, what do you do about that? But, there's also this idea too, like, and it comes back to what you were talking about, how, like, take care of your space. Just take care of your own physical space, that
Right.
like your little vector in the world, your responsibilities, and take care of that as best you can, because like everything is interconnected 100%. Like, if you're taking care of your space and it's run pretty optimally, and like you're living a life where it's like, okay, you're creating, let's say, minimal environmental impact, if you want to call it that, then it's like, okay, well, you're sort of doing your part too. It's like, so it's like,
Well,
it's
and you don't
again,
know
like,
who's watching you and who you're inspiring to
and that's the
without
other
even
thing, too.
telling them.
Yes.
And they say,
big
hey, you
time.
know what? Andy's doing a really, great job at reducing his ecological footprint or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
Or even he lives with kindness and compassion. It's not even you telling somebody else, but they're just looking at you and saying, you know what?
true.
He seems like
It's true.
really cool. Maybe I should try that,
Like-
or whatever it is, right? So it's
Yeah.
not so much you saying, and it sounds kind of corny, but I do think you set an example and you send a message to the world with the way that you live.
I agree.
And so I think too, that's sometimes more powerful than showing up to some rally or something. Do you know what I mean? Telling people this is how you should be living.
Well, yeah. I mean, again, it's like such an interesting dilemma, right?
Absolutely.
Because there is the whole point of communicating what's potentially wrong too.
And
normally,
there's a place for that, for advocacy and all that, and I believe
Yeah.
in that as well.
So
yeah.
it's like, but it's finding that balance. It's like, well, it's probably a good place to start, to turn it in on yourself first, and make sure your life is pretty damn organized and
agree.
together before you start telling everybody else what to do.
I agree.
And I more or less agree with that point.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, it's like you have to sort of be aware of all of those things and balance it all.
Well,
right?
it's all like a web, and we're all connected. I think too, when people can start feeling, powerlessness, is when they feel like they want to do the advocacy stuff and they feel like they're not being heard or whatever, that can be difficult as well too, right? Because everybody has a message, everyone has a story to share, or things they feel like they want to put out into the world, and all that stuff, deserves to be heard. So when you feel like if you're doing that and people aren't being receptive or taking you seriously, and there's a ton of examples of that right now, just in the news and the media and wherever, everywhere.
Yeah.
That can be very difficult as well. So
one of my healing modalities, which has been very effective for me, has been ayahuasca, and we've talked about this many times on the podcast.
Yes, you have.
Do you know what that is?
I know what that is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's been, and one of the answers I got when I was asking the question, what should I do? How can I best serve humanity?
Yep.
And the answer I got was just be a shining light as an example. Just be an example of what's possible.
Interesting.
That's what it told me. So I'm like,
beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm on it.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty simple, but it's like, again, like it's just talking about how you show up in all areas of your life all the time, in all your relationships.
And
right?
have the courage to show up too, right? Because it does take a certain, shining your light, it takes a lot of courage. Some of the best decisions I've made in my life have asked a lot of courage of me and stuff, and sometimes it can be scary when other people don't understand or might not be supportive, but to be a shining light truly can be parts of it lonely and parts of it not lonely, but do you know what I mean? Like,
what about doing the right thing that's unpopular? What about
story of my life?
What about truths that don't want to be heard? And like, what if there are even like mass, like sort of ideological truths that are going on in the world that aren't accurate? And if you say something against them, like now you're the villain, even though you're potentially right. What should you do in that case?
I don't know, like with the world. I know with myself personally, like I used to be I really struggled with things I knew in my heart that I should be doing, and struggled to be honest with the people in my life about it. So I've struggled with that. I'm at a point now where it's just like, hey, no one's going to live for me. And so I have to just follow it through because the cost is too great if I don't.
Yeah.
And I can't afford that. So I'm at a point now, but it wasn't always like that. I was very afraid because there's a lot of judgments and a lot of people don't understand the decisions that you make or the risks that you take. I've taken some out there risks in my life and things that people say, you're nuts, don't do this. It's crazy, but those decisions have paid off really well, and I've been able to do things that I know in my heart I would have not been able to achieve if I didn't go out on that.
The calculated risks.
Some of them calculated, some of them just seemingly
unconscious,
just on my journey. Yeah, like just saying with what I have to do, or expressing what I believe in, or doing things that. Telling people my truths when I thought these people aren't going to receive me very well, or they don't have room for my kind or whatever, right? Even when I was in graduate school, there was a lot of, that I was doing like my thesis on like addiction and recovery, and that I used to be an addict and stuff. There wasn't a lot of people in graduate school that were in my situation and open about it.
That you knew about. Well, there you go, right?
That I knew about.
Yeah.
But me, it was like, no shame. I don't care because this is what I'm writing my papers on, and this is who I am, and like I'm using this. I'm just like these addicts, except I'm here and they're there for now and whatever, right? So, but just a lot of that, and you're afraid because you think, oh, I'm imposter syndrome, or I'm not supposed to be here, or...
Well, I come back to this phrase that sometimes our pain becomes our greatest gift to the world.
You betcha.
Right? So it's like you were exploring how to heal yourself.
Yeah.
And if somebody's on a similar path, you could maybe show them along the way.
Absolutely. And how cool that you're thinking, this is my life, or I'm not smart, or I'm not educated. And it's like to be able to use that pain, and it's like therapy to write about and say, this is a part of who I am. And it's made me into more compassionate, understanding person. Yeah. And it's made me stronger.
And you could potentially understand. Let's say no one's ever had a problem with addiction, and now they're going to be an addiction counselor, and they've never experienced it, like the grip of like a substance. But now here's the thing: addiction's so wide, right? It could be, they might have other addictions, so it's very possible it could be food or anything, gambling. There's so many things,
and gambling.
Right?
Oh yeah.
But
people have narrow.
Like drug addiction
views.
is one that is like particularly harmful. You know what I mean? It's going to destroy your body. It can ruin you, it can kill you completely, right?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
but it's like you've been down that road. You could probably relate way better to somebody who's in it than somebody who's like read it all in textbooks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like for me, I found it was a good mix of, and it well-rounded out my life too. Like just feeling like to be book smart and to, go to university and learn all that. And then I've, had my time on the street and.
Is that part of your process is when you're working with someone to potentially, dig into their story and so that they can see it maybe again from that different angle of how their story is rich with content and how it can be used to become their gift to the world and all that kind of stuff? Do you find that as part of your process when you're working with people?
Absolutely, very much so. Yeah, because I don't want to leave any of it out because I'm the kind of person that believes that they're all little pieces, like nothing's for nothing. So it fits somewhere. And, a lot of times there's things in my life, I'm sure they fit somewhere. I may not even have a conscious recollection of where it fits, if that makes any sense. The things have happened or things, sometimes you have aha moments and you're like, yes, I know where this fits in my life and I know how this helps me. Other things happen and you're like, I'm not really sure how that added to me or how that added to my story, but I know it's something. I feel like it's something.
You believe overall that it does, though?
Absolutely, I do. Yeah, and so I try and... I'm not a person that believes that this life is just random and we're just going along. I'm not here for no reason either.
Yeah. I wanted to just touch on really quickly your podcast.
Yes.
Grief Dreams.
Yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit about what that's all about and sort of the work that you're doing there?
Yeah, sure. So the Grief Dreams podcast we started like just over a little bit over a year ago. We have 65 episodes now. We try to do one a week. I work on it with two of my colleagues, Sean Ram and Joshua Black. He's a leading grief dreams researcher.
And I'll be interviewing him probably in the fall.
In September, yeah.
Yeah.
So he's doing his PhD in grief dreams research at Brock University. And so we've written a couple academic articles together and done some research looking into dreams that people have of their lost loved ones and how it helps them in their grief. So people that have somebody pass away, and that person comes to them in a dream. Some people believe that they're visitation type dreams, like the person's spirit is coming to see them. Other people don't see it that way, but just see it as a comforting experience that they're having. Some people have described when having these dreams that it was like the equivalent of 10 years of psychotherapy, like in terms of how it helped them
with the grieving process.
Like people that couldn't get out of bed would have a dream, and the next morning they would wake up.
Wow, that's incredible.
It's wild. So when you ask them, like, and we have like hundreds of dreams that we've collected. They're amazing. The profound experiences that people have, and it's always just kind of been, an interest. Me and my colleague Josh, we've all, like been into dreams forever, just dreams in general, and have both kept dream journals, and have kind of just used it as an indicator of where we're at in life. And so as I've recorded my dreams and kind of paid more attention to them, now I use them as a tool to navigate things. Like I just know if I have certain dreams, what it means in terms of where I'm at emotionally and stuff like that. And I'm sure, I don't know, maybe you've had an experience like that where you're feeling unsettled and you have an unsettling dream and you wake up and you go, yeah, it kind of makes sense.
I'll share an experience. But
Please do.
Okay, the dream thing. Dream journaling happening that's going on. I have the book beside my bed. I just never roll over.
I was going to
right
ask you, how do you, because I've done stints of dream journaling as well, how do you do it?
So I record on my iPhone on the voice memos.
Oh, that's interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because then it just uploads to my iCloud, and then I'll transcribe it at a later date when I'm feeling spunky.
Right.
But because I'm always half asleep, right?
Totally. Yeah.
my voice in there, oh gosh, but like, you know,
Yeah,
you're just recording, right? But you
Right.
just want to get it out there
Yes.
because the
Yeah.
recall,
It's so
Like,
hard.
You know, I find like within the first couple minutes of waking up, I can remember it.
it's gone.
But if I can recall it within those minutes, I'm more likely to remember the
To
dream
remember
long
it.
term.
Okay.
That's what
And
I
do you ever
noticed.
have it when you wake up and you don't remember, but then you get in the shower and then it
It comes
starts
back
coming
sometimes?
back?
Yeah.
And then you get out of the shower
yeah.
and it's gone.
I sometimes consciously will it. I'm like, what was it? What was I dreaming? What was it? Oh, then I start remembering pieces. I'm like, oh yeah, that's what it was about.
Right.
I've had my dreams are pretty freaking crazy sometimes.
Yes.
Like, not necessarily bad. Sometimes dark, but sometimes just what the hell is that?
Right.
But having this one, and that is actually before I had to do this big talk at the float conference. It was in front of like the whole float industry, like 500 people. So I was pretty nervous about it, and I was actually launching this Why We Float campaign, which was trying to be a industry-wide marketing campaign for floating.
Yeah.
And I kept having this recurring nightmare of a giant tsunami, like the one in that movie Interstellar when he goes to that planet made of water. Did you see that one?
No, but I know what you're talking about. I've
Picture a
seen it.
tsunami that's
Right.
like 300 meters high.
Okay.
And it's like just coming at me. And I'm like, oh, wow. And it would just bear down on me. And right before it would get to me, I'd wake up every time. And then literally the week before the conference, I just charged at it. And I just ran at the tsunami and I just dove into it. And I never had that dream again.
So what do you interpret that as?
I was just, I was,
You-
obviously I kind of just charged into
yeah.
that. Because I was feeling this sort of, this pressure to really, for this talk and also to launch this thing. And hopefully it would be well received and all that stuff. So, and it was
Right.
going to be, it was literally in front of a wall of people, like a wave of people. So it was
Right.
very symbolic of that.
Very much so.
So that's, and it was leading right up to that. And then after I ran into it, and then after that, never had the dream again. So
Interesting.
yeah.
Very cool. Well, like the continuity hypothesis says that your dreams are reflective of your waking life. So basically, if you're, people who are really grief stricken, their dreams, whether they contain imagery of the deceased or not, are going to be emotionally charged in the same way that they would feel.
Have you seen any of our podcasts with Dr. Carlos de Leon? Have you heard of him?
No.
Okay, you should probably get him on your podcast. We can talk
Yeah,
about
he's
this
awesome.
afterward.
Okay, interesting.
But,
Very
yeah,
cool.
Listen to our podcast with them.
Okay, I
I've done
will.
his dream therapy course, and kind of talking about that kind of stuff and and how to work with your dreams, basically. And he's a local guy in Vancouver here. Fantastic. Like, we've had him on twice. We're doing an event on April 11th, which will be yeah.
We're going to be having him as a Man Talk speaker
Oh, very cool. Nice.
on June 11th.
Congrats. Cool.
Yeah, not we still have to lock down the space, but
Okay.
yeah, Man Talks is a whole nother ball of wax.
Yeah.
I didn't even talk about Man Talks.
But definitely
No.
go into Dr. Carlos de Leon, his Ontogeny Center. I think you'd really, really connect with him.
Okay,
so definitely
amazing.
Check it out.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Well, that's awesome. In the spirit of not exhausting, I think we have a lot of things like we kind
I
of just
know.
scratched the surface of
Yeah,
the dream world,
truly,
and
yes.
we could totally dive into that. So
Yeah. Well, you know what? When Josh comes, he can.
why don't you come out with him, or maybe maybe
Yeah.
or we could do them separate. And you can come on yourself again whenever you like.
Absolutely.
But-
Well, we're doing a talk on September 27th at Banyan Books. I'll be
Oh, so
doing
you
it
guys
with-
still work together?
with Josh? Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
Well, okay.
Yeah,
the
we'd love to
talk,
come
right,
together.
I
And
see
we're
an
gonna do-
email, and it's like a blip in my consciousness. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's what he was emailing me.
Yes.
about.
So
Yeah.
we're gonna do that talk, but we're actually in the process of scheduling another one, and we're in the process of locking down a venue. So
Awesome.
I know.
Well,
yeah.
keep us informed on that one for
Yeah.
sure, and
Yeah.
maybe we'll try to get out to it and
Yeah.
hear the talk. And
Yeah.
well, either way, we're gonna get it first hand here.
Absolutely. But he'll
Yeah.
have a lot of really juicy dream stuff to touch on with you guys, and yeah, it's just a really cool topic. And the podcast, we talk a little bit about people's life journey at the beginning and what they do for work. We have people on from all walks of life, and then the second half is touching on their grief and if they've had any dreams and what that experience was like, and then if they would like to have any dream that they kind of construct containing their lost loved one, what would that look like, and whatever. So
Very
it's
cool.
cool. Yeah. Sometimes people call back to the podcast and say, I had the dream that I conjured up, and it's just kind of a really cool way to connect with people. So
Awesome. And how can people connect with you if they want to reach out?
I'm on Instagram at Jade Karling Coaching, and then my website at jadekarlingcoaching.com. And yeah, I have a Facebook page as well, and it's under the same name. So yeah,
Excellent.
same handle
Perfect.
everywhere.
Yay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we can wrap it up for today.
Yeah.
So thank you so
Thank
much
you
for
so much.
coming on, and we'll do it again.
Yeah, good stuff. Thanks,
Anything
guys.
else you want to throw out there today, Mike?
No, I'm good. Thanks for joining us, everybody. I appreciate
Throw
it.
something out. How about your Instagram handle?
At Floating Yogi. Come
You never
look
throw anything out.
Come look at pictures of my son,
There.
Leo, who I love.
It was. It's nice.
Aw.
It's very
Yeah.
cute. for
Great.
sure. Yeah, and of course, Floathouse, floathouse.ca. Use the promo code Vancouver Real. Save yourself 20% off a single float. Mindful Mass, Vancouver Real Communities, Man Talks, and
Grind bars, Brain Evolve.
yeah, everything. And AndyZaremba.com.
There
for
you go.
all your Andy Zaremba needs.
There you
I'll
go.
take 3.
And if actually you like what you heard today, leaving us a rating or a review on
Yes,
iTunes,
that helps a
YouTube or
lot.
Stitcher is really appreciated. And as always, thanks for listening.
Yeah, if you're still listening, like, thank you. Like, if you come
I think
this
people
far
listen.
through the whole introduction,
Yeah.
intro, whatever it's called, outro, thank you.
But you never know, right? This
Love
is
you
out
guys.
in the ether on the internet until the internet implodes,
There you go.
Thank you.
which is when, I don't know, maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. Who knows? Anyways, let's just wrap this up
Until next time.
Okay, great.
to whatever is.
To whatever is.